All right. Well, thanks so much to everyone for being here today. We know that buying a home can feel overwhelming right now in this market between the rates, headlines, prices, and social media opinions. But our goal here today is to simplify all of that. And I'm Shannon Quicksall, the lender that rocks with Fairway Mortgage, and I'm here and joined by Paige Morris with eXp Realty. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hey y'all, Paige Morris here. I toggle kind of back and forth between farm and ranch real estate and residential. I help support families, buyers, sellers, and investors in the Central Texas area. And so I've lived here in the Central Texas area now for over 20 years, and I love taking care of people. And so I'm really excited to get to partner with Shannon, who is also a local lender that can help support our families, buyers, sellers, and investors in terms of accomplishing the real estate goals. So, without further ado, let's kick it off with our first slide so that we can dig in and help you walk away with some pieces that will help you in terms of accomplishing your goals for buying property in today's market.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to note today is definitely not about pressuring anyone to buy. We just want to help you understand how to make the best decision for your goals, your timeline, and your budget. This is all about you and the best strategy to help you win in today's market. Before we dive in, I do need to say that Fairway is an equal housing opportunity lender and all loans are subject to approval.
Checking all the boxes, that's important.
Absolutely. So most buyers think that they're losing because they don't have enough money or because rates are too high in today's market. But in reality, most buyers are losing because they're not being shown the right options for navigating this market. For example, I might have two buyers with the exact same income. One thinks they can't afford a home, and the other one is already under contract because they understand seller credits, buy downs, and loan options. There are multiple ways to structure the same deal, and I'm sure Paige can elaborate on that.
Absolutely. So, one of the things I want you to think about is this is not voodoo magic. If you make the same amount of money as your neighbor, but your neighbor is able to go under contract on something, I promise you, it just has to do with what fits into the algorithm. So when you're looking at making a purchase on a property, there's more than one way that we can structure the offer. And we'll dig in a little bit farther into that in some other slides. But I want you to know that there's just different options. There's different variables in the contract. And so all of those can kind of be worked in your advantage. And I will say one of the benefits right now is we are in a buyer's market. It is definitely in the buyer's advantage. And so we are seeing that homes or properties in general are closing at, below list price across the board. We're looking at 92% of homes, I'm sorry, 90 closing is coming in at 92% of original list price. That means that homes in general are closing 8% below what they're listed at. So that tells you that just because it's listed at a certain price doesn't mean that that's what they're actually going to close at. So that's just one of the things to keep in mind when you're looking at numbers in terms of affordability.
That is so true. We need to shout to the rooftops that right now is a buyer's market. Forget about the rates. Now is the time. If you've been sitting on the sidelines to get in there, the right structure can make a huge difference in your monthly payment and any upfront cash that could be needed. And so our job today is to help you understand all of these options so you can make the smartest move possible.
Absolutely.
And what we're covering today. So, first, we're going to talk about what is really happening in the market because there's a lot of noise out there, and Paige is very close to that since she's out there with buyers day in and day out. So, she'll be able to share some insights onto that and to that. And then we're going to talk about what actually controls your monthly payment because it is not just the interest rate. We will also walk through some strategies buyers are using to lower their payments and compete more effectively. And then we'll cover some common mistakes so you know what to avoid. And finally, we'll talk about how to create a plan that's personalized to you.
Absolutely.
All right. So, just like the headline says, right, Paige, this is not a bad market. It's a strategic one.
I tell people all the time, real estate's always good for somebody. It just depends on who's that somebody.
1,000%. And so the narrative that we're hearing, and I'm sure you're getting this a lot, Paige, is a lot of buyers are waiting for those rates to drop before they buy. But Paige, can you share what's going to happen once these rates drop and more buyers jump back into the market?
So I get that question quite a bit, and I will say when I have folks who are trying to compare, do I wait until rates drop, in order to buy something, or do I take a risk in their eyes and purchase something now with what might be a higher interest rate? I will tell you, think of it like on a playground. When you were a kid, maybe you rode on the seesaw. So think of it as when the rates are going to drop. That means that the cost of the house that you're looking to purchase is going to increase. So it's like the seesaw. When one side goes up, the other side goes down. So now we have prices that are some of the most affordable prices that we've had in the last 7 years. So we're looking at folks are able to get into properties that are like 2019 prices. Now, interest rates are going to be similar to what they were back in 2019. Now, think of it as, I mean, we're able to kind of turn back time, which is nice. We had a hotbed of low interest rates, but we also saw the cost of homes skyrocketed from 2020 until about 2023. And then the market kind of reset itself. So just keep that in mind. If you're holding out for a lower interest rate, just understand that that means you're also holding out for a higher price point on your ideal home.
That is so on point. Just like you shared, whenever those rates drop, it's going to naturally create more competition in the market. We're going to get back to potential bidding wars and higher home prices. For example, if you were to buy a home today at $350,000 and rates drop next year, you can refinance that rate. But if the same home is worth $375,000 next year, well, you can't go back and buy it at today's price. So, you
Absolutely.
can always refinance your rate. You can't go back and purchase a home at a better price point. So,
Right.
that's something that's very key to keep in mind. So let's talk about payments. One of the biggest misconceptions buyers have is that the interest rate is the only thing that matters. But the reality is there are four major pieces that make up your payment. It's your interest rate, the purchase price, your taxes, and your insurance. And of course, your overall strategy when, someone like Paige, your great realtor goes and submits that offer for you and asks that seller to cover maybe some of your closing costs, maybe some kind of concession towards your interest rate, things like that. And so there's so many ways we can structure your deal to make sure your payment is where you're comfortable. For example, I could show you a $400,000 house with the lower tax rate that has the exact same monthly payment as a $375,000 house with a much higher rate. And so all of these pieces together are, they're varied. And, a tax rate in one town or even, in one neighborhood could be different than the next neighborhood. So all of these things, it's very good to be educated on. Um, Paige, do you want to talk a bit about using those seller credits to buy down the rate and how, and you're seeing
Absolutely.
that happen right now?
Absolutely. I actually have a first-time home buyer right now that I'm working with, and we just had this conversation today. The tax rates that we've looked at on properties in one town versus another town give him up to $50,000 more of purchase power. So he can buy a
Wow.
house that's
Wow.
$50,000 more expensive in one town with lower taxes versus the next town over, which has higher taxes. He has to drop his purchase price in terms of what he can afford. So I really want to make sure that we hit on that. If you're not tied to one specific area, I encourage you to take a look around because those taxes can really make or break maybe higher square footage or maybe a higher quality home. In terms of strategy, so what we're seeing right now is buyer concessions are very common, and this plays into whenever you go to make a purchase, you could oftentimes I see close to listing price or maybe a little bit below, but included in that offer is a request for buyer concessions. Now, buyer concessions are helpful because it's credit, essentially money that you get back, but it has to be used for something that is in benefit of the purchase. So you could use it towards possibly buying down your interest rate. I'll come back to that in a second. You could use it towards helping offset your out-of-pocket closing costs. So you could make a purchase and you could come to the table and let's say your closing costs are going to be $11,000. Well, if you can get buyer concessions and it covers, 9,700, well, then your out-of-pocket cost to come to closing, it cut down significantly.
For sure.
Now, there are some folks who may be making a purchase and they want to use it towards making some renovations. That's an option in some cases as well. But we're going to focus today on the interest rate or the closing costs. So when we use it to buy down the interest rate, that is something I definitely suggest we talk with our mortgage people about. I stay in the lane of property, but what I will say is that I've had people literally ask me, is this voodoo magic? This is where that comment comes in because when I tell them we can apply this, we'll just say 9,700 of a closing of a credit, the buyer concessions, if we apply that towards your interest rate, that decreases your monthly payment for the life of your loan. So
Exactly.
that's something that is going to be more than $9,700 back in your pocket. We're just stretching it
Right.
out over, 30 years typically. So that's something to think about. Some folks need a little bit of help to get to the closing table in terms of closing costs. So then they might use it towards closing costs.
Mhm.
But you can also use it towards your rate. So if you can get maybe, I don't know, point 0.3, point 0.4 off of the rate. And Shannon, I'll let you fill in the gaps there. That is something that helps benefit your monthly payment, like I said, for 30 years. So those are
Absolutely.
some of the options that we have.
Yes, sometimes buying down your rate can make a difference of up to, $250 to $400 off of your monthly payments, which is a significant chunk because, as Paige shared, and it all depends on back to that strategy, right? I'm going to ask you, how long do you plan on staying in this home? Because if you know, hey, I'm only going to be in this home for 4 or 5 years, then maybe buying down that rate isn't going to be the best strategy for you. And we can show you why. And maybe you'd rather keep some more cash in your pocket and not use all your reserves for that those closing costs. So yeah, there's lots of different ways we can structure your deal, and we're happy to walk you through all of those. If you set up your own personalized buyer consultation with us after today's call, we'd love to walk you through your personal numbers as well. And so the key is we don't guess, we actually model. And so I always tell buyers, stay away from these online calculators because you're never going to get the full picture with that. But just some examples. Let's say buyer A buys a $325,000 home with a slightly higher interest rate, but buyer B buys a $360,000 home with a slightly lower rate. So at first glance, buyer B might feel like they got the better deal because the rate is lower, but buyer B is also financing $35,000 more. So that means they are paying interest on a larger balance for potentially 30 years, of course, unless they refinance or sell the home. Buyer A may actually build equity faster because they bought at a lower price point. So another common example is a buyer who purchases now and refinances later. If they find the right home and the payment works for you today, that is all that matters, okay? You find the home that you love, we make the payment work for you, and then we can always improve that financing later if rates come down. And they're going to come back down a little bit. I will be honest, I don't anticipate getting back to that 3% range unless there's another global pandemic, which none of us want to
Right.
have happen.
I don't know that I want whatever negative national or international event comes with it that warrants it. But I will
Exactly.
say real estate's a cycle. It's all a cycle. So you have to look at what stage of the cycle are we in. And then you look at a pattern. Really, history typically repeats itself. So you
Yeah.
can take a look at, okay, maybe I need to wait. Maybe now's the time to buy based on my goals. Or if it's not, then you look at the cycle. So I always tell folks, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can look at history and find a pattern.
Yes, 1,000%. And it's all there for us. You can research, rate history. I did a really great post on Instagram recently. It's had over like 400,000 views, which I never expected, but it just shows the history of rates from 1975 all the way until now. And, there's definitely patterns and cycles. And, 6% today is nothing compared to what, our moms and dads were paying back in the 80s. I think, my mother-in-law said she paid, 16% on her first home.
I
Of course,
believe
things
it.
were cheaper back then, right? But that's a high interest rate. So,
That is, it is. It
so
makes our rates today look like chump change, but You know, it all has to fit into your goals. And I get when people have this short-term memory of the threes and fours. I will
Mhm.
say that I understand. I understand where there's the desire for it to
Yeah.
go back to that. But like I said, this is the goal in this lesson or video that we're sharing is to help people understand that if that's what you're waiting for, just know that there's a flip side to that. So
Hmm.
making sure that you're also preparing for that. If you're wanting rates to go lower, we also need to be prepared for a little higher purchase price.
1,000%. So let's talk about seller concessions. This is one of my favorite strategies in today's market is asking that seller to help cover your costs. And back when those rates were 3%, this wasn't happening, folks.
Mhm.
So this is a very unique opportunity that is a part of this market right now. So for example, instead of asking a seller to lower the sales price by $10,000, we may ask them to contribute that $10,000 towards your closing costs or a rate buy down. That could reduce your monthly payment more than that small price reduction would. And so, for example, if you reduce the price by 10,000, that's only going to save you around $60 a month, but using that same amount toward a rate buy down could have save you several $100s a month. And so this is another one of those reasons why it is so important to work with a lender and a realtor who know how to structure your deal creatively. And so another option is temporary buy downs. And so this is a great option for buyers who know their income is likely to increase over the next couple of years, right? So maybe right now, you're starting out in your job, but you anticipate, in a year or two, you're going to move up the ladder, your salary is going to change, or you just kind of know or anticipate that. You could lock your rate in today at a 6.5%, for example, and a 2-1 buy down means that you would pay only 4.5% in year one, 5.5% in year two, and then the full 6.5% would start in year three. So that could mean an upfront savings of several $100s per month in the early years of home ownership. And that lower payment can also help you adjust to being a homeowner, furnishing your house, building your savings back up, or just simply feel comfortable at the payment range that you're in. And you can also refinance later if rates improve. So the 2-1 buy down is really a great option. Have you been seeing a lot of your buyers go for that page?
I have, yes. I will say that I see a lot of this, particularly with new builds. This is huge with new builds.
Mhm.
I will say that finding a lender that has the 2-1, I've even seen a 3-1 buy down as well. It's nice to have those options. You know,
Mhm.
lending is not one size fits all. I also had a conversation today with one of my clients who's we're going under contract and she wanted to shop her rate. She wanted to see are there some other options. And
Mhm.
I told her, I said, girl, go for it. There's
Mhm.
more than one way to accomplish your goals.
Yep.
And I prioritize the connection that I have with the person I'm working with. She has a little bit of a tighter margin. So for her,
Mhm.
if she can get, even the slightest bit of a lower payment, by shopping around, that's very important to her. And so I encouraged her. I said, I completely understand. And so that's what she wanted to look and see if there were some other options
Yep.
because there are different companies that have some different options. Not every bank or not every lender is going to offer a temporary buy down. And so these are some things, again, why we're doing this is because they want to educate you on there's more options out there. And as you become a homeowner, this is your time to step into that level of responsibility and educating yourself and knowing your options is a piece of that. So you may not want to be a homeowner necessarily tomorrow, but at least you're educating yourself to know, hey, the buyer and like buyer concessions, for example, I had somebody come to me who's been a homeowner for decades, had no idea that was even an option. But
Mm.
in past markets, it wasn't as common. And so
Right.
it was a coachable moment for that buyer as
Mhm.
well. Again, to help him understand it wasn't voodoo magic, but it's just a way to fit and offer a contract better. But like I said, taking the steps to educate yourself and knowing what's out there is always going to be in your advantage. So when you are ready to make that commitment, you know that you can ask questions and you can ask to see which is going to be the best fit.
Yes, 1,000%. At the end of the day, we want, again, you to be comfortable with, the home you're purchasing, the payment that you're getting, all of the above. And so, taking that time to really educate yourself and learn all of your options is so key, because this is your biggest investment that most people make in their life is their home. So, always take time to learn and understand what's best for you and your unique circumstance. So a strong pre-approval is key. Whenever you are excited and you get that kind of bug to go house shopping, I never recommend doing that without having your pre-approval first.
I
And I
agree.
want to talk a little bit about the pre-qualification versus that pre-approval. But either way, you need to get pre-qualified because that helps you not go out. And I'm sure, Paige, you've seen folks do this, go out and shop for homes in a price range that they're not maybe going to qualify for. And then they're disappointed. And, then when they actually see homes that are in their price range, they get discouraged, and might not want to move forward.
Absolutely. And I will say my one piece to add on this slide is there are several properties nowadays where they will not let you schedule a showing without documentation or at least just knowing that a pre-approval, the buyer's agent has a pre-approval on hand. There are several agents who are now getting to where they want to know for sure that everybody's serious and prepared to move forward. So it's just best practice for everyone in order to set clear expectations or what's the word I'm looking for? Realistic expectations, but also to show the sellers that you're serious about your goals and your intentions.
Yes, 1,000%. And I want to talk a bit about the difference between a pre-approval and a pre-qualification. So, a pre-qualification means that I just might have glanced at your credit score and your income. I have not fully sent your file for underwriting, which means we've, reviewed all your documents, we've reviewed your income, your assets, your tax returns, your employment. So when a seller sees pre-qualification, they know, okay, someone's, and maybe sometimes the seller doesn't know, agents know this more than sellers, but they think, oh, well, maybe this one's not 100% because I know they haven't fully underwritten that file for pre-approval, but they've at least, verified their income and their credit score. But so when a seller or a seller's agent sees that you have an actual pre-approval and that all your documents have been reviewed up front, they know you're a more serious buyer. And so, for example, if there are two offers on a house and one buyer is fully underwritten while the other one is only pre-qualified, the seller may choose that stronger financing offer, even if it is slightly lower. Maybe their offer is a little bit lower versus your pre-qualified offer. So, at the end of the day, sellers want certainty. They do not want surprises halfway through the process. And then at Fairway, we actually have a really great program that's a cash guarantee program. Love this program so much if you're ever, for buyers who are in situations where they're competing against cash buyers. And that's also a fully underwritten situation that we pre-approve you. We might take a blood sample, right? Just to get you fully pre-approved. But that cash guarantee can come in handy depending on your market. All right. So then let's talk about timing the market. I'm going to let Paige take this one because I know she talks a lot about, is there a perfect time to buy?
I will say ultimately it all comes down to your timeline and your specific situation. Some folks who are first-time home buyers or maybe they're renters, maybe they're transitioning into their first home. This is a prime season for those types of buyers. They're not having to worry about selling something else. They are able to typically move a little bit faster. However, if that's not the case, that's okay. So the thing is right now we're in spring. So this visual I love because it talks about this is peak competition. The prices are a little bit higher. I will say that this is the time of year that we see a few more multi-offer situations. Those do still happen. I've had a handful of them over the last 6 to 8 months. And it's if a house is priced right, that's what happens. You're going to get multiple people who are interested. With summertime, high activity, moderate inventory, the inventory starts to slow down a little bit more. because you have less of the buying season left. So this is a time where those properties that maybe are decreasing in price, maybe they started off a little higher, but they're still sitting on the market. Typically, you're going to find some that are going to be a little more motivated to move, especially if they started off in the spring season and they're still on the market. And then when you get into fall, this is where I will say, getting into fall, we usually have, families with kids, things tend to slow down in terms of what their interest level is. You still have motivated sellers because they're trying to transition and move, but you have a little bit less competition. So I will say that it is definitely not dead in the fall. You got a lot of folks who are wanting to transition and try to get things moved before the holidays. And when you work with a great lender like Shannon, they're usually able to get us a closing timeline of about 30 days, which is nice. And so you've got a lot of activity, especially in October, because folks want to get into a house before Thanksgiving. And so then that puts us into the winter time. This opportunity window is very unique. I had a hotbed of closings just in the month of December, and I will say that you're able to pick up some opportunities in the winter months and going into January. January is a little slower. A lot of folks are more focused on other things in January, but this is where you have a lower amount of competition. You have some folks that will take a stagnant listing off the market and let it rest until we get back into the spring season. But you also have a little bit more negotiating leverage. If you're looking at something that maybe is a brand new build, there's also usually a lot more incentives in especially in December before we're getting into the beginning of the year. So these are some things to think about that are in your favor. Now, on the selling side, I could do a whole video or a whole spiel just on that, but this kind of helps give you an idea. I don't want to discourage people from thinking that moving in the winter time is bad, because there's less on the market. If you are a little more open to the requirements that you would like for your home, you can find something at a lower price point or have some more negotiating room, which I love. So it really just depends on how flexible that you're willing to be. If we can kind of get a little bit of variance, you can find some great deals, or you can find something that you didn't know you were going to fall in love with. So I always encourage folks to kind of think outside of the box a little bit, and you can really pick up some prime opportunities for sure.
Absolutely. So the bottom line is the best time to buy is when it makes sense for your life, not when a headline tells you to.
Absolutely.
And so let's talk about some mistakes. There could be, there's mistakes that you can make in any aspect of life, right? But when it comes to home buying, the first mistake I see buyers do is waiting for that perfect rate. Again, that perfect rate may come, but the house you wanted may be more expensive by then, right? That second mistake is focusing only on the purchase price instead of total payment. So remember those factors that we talked about earlier that goes into your total payment, such as property taxes, insurance, all of the above. You've got to make sure you look at all of those pieces of the puzzle to get the full picture on your payment and make sure, you know, that that's going to be comfortable for you at the end of the day. When I have a buyer call me for a pre-approval, the first question I ask, or one of the first questions I ask is, what is your total monthly payment that you'd be comfortable with? Because even if they qualify, I had a buyer the other day that qualified for up to, over $500,000. But when she told me what she was comfortable with for her monthly payment, I told her you need to be looking in the $300,000 price range because I'm not going to tell someone to go to a $500,000 home if that's going to stretch their budget. Nobody wants to be house broke. That's a big mistake too that a lot of buyers make is they become house broke. And so, for example, two houses priced exactly the same can vary, have very different monthly payments depending on taxes, also HOA fees. You want to know is the neighborhood I'm buying in, is there HOA fee? What are those going to be? And then again, don't rely too heavily on those online calculators. They're helpful, but they do not know your credit score, your debt to income ratio, the loan program that would best fit your needs, or your taxes and insurance. So please, don't rely on those online calculators because I've had buyers think they could afford one payment online and then come to me and discover that the actual numbers are very, very different. So that's why getting numbers and just going ahead and getting that pre-approval early is so important. Do you have anything
Absolutely.
to
And I will
add?
say, those online calculators, I always caution folks, and there's I had somebody one time who was asking some questions and they sent me some screenshots of they had done some research on their loan quotes, if you will, and they had found a property that they liked, and so they were looking at, there's always a button somewhere that says calculate your monthly payment on this property. So of
Mhm.
course, it's enticing. You want to do some market research? I don't blame
Right.
you. What
Hmm.
happened was is they were curious, so they clicked the button and then they get what is calculated as their estimated loan monthly payment. And what they did was they actually compared it between two different third-party sites.
Mm.
So they were looking at realtor.com and then they also looked at the same concept on Zillow and it
Right.
was off by
Oh,
quite a bit.
oh
And
my
so
goodness.
that's why I say you just want to make sure that you're talking with someone that you can connect with and that you can be curious with and you can ask questions with and you can weigh your options. Because as we've talked about, we have so many different variables that we can kind of plug and play. And we want to
Mhm.
make sure it's the best fit for you, but we also don't want to quote you something and then come back and have it like way out of the ballpark. And I will say, I've had this happen before where somebody had connected with a lender from out of state and they
Mm.
gave them an idea or a ballpark. Well, then they didn't calculate property taxes
Oh,
correctly. So
yeah.
then when it came back, their property taxes were much higher, and then my client was really upset.
Mm.
So that's why we like to ask those questions. And I will also make a plug here is you want to make sure that you're working as a team, right?
Mhm.
When you're making a decision as a home buyer, you want to have a professional. You want to talk to an insurance professional. You want to talk to a mortgage professional. You want to talk to a real estate professional because you want all of them working together to give you information so that you
Mhm.
can make informed decisions. So
Yeah.
that's why this is really important. Get your team together and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yes, you basically just summed up the next slide for us, Paige. That's perfect. We were leading into that. Your team matters. And, buying your home is, as Paige said, not something you should navigate alone. You've got a team to help you. Lean into your realtor. Let them help you find the right home, negotiate those terms, and guide you through all of those inspections and the contracts that are going to come. Your lender is going to help you understand your numbers, structure that financing, making sure you are making the best financial decision. And so when your lender and your realtor communicate well, everything in your deal is going to go smoother. You're going to avoid those surprises, right? Like the the property taxes getting you in the end. Texas is one of the states that has higher property taxes. I'm not originally from here, and so that was a big surprise to me when we first moved here and bought our first home. So you want to make sure you're working with local professionals who understand the market and the area that you're buying in. And the right team is not just going to help you close. We're going to help you make the smart decision that you're going to feel good about after closing day. We don't want any buyer's remorse.
That's right. That's right. I love it.
Yes. And so let's talk next steps. Again, we're not here to pressure anyone to buy a home today if that's not, on your bingo card for 2026, right? But if this is something that you're thinking about doing, the next step, and if you're listening to this today, hopefully you're getting some clarity, right? This is why we wanted to offer this free buyer strategy session, because we wanted to go over what would your budget need to look like? What goals do you have? Your timeline, different loan scenarios. And so, Paige and I are both available following this. If you watch this and you would like to reach out to us, we can show you, the answers to those questions. You can leave that meeting with a real plan for your, next steps. And, instead of guessing along the way of what you need to do, we can give you real numbers, tangible numbers. And even if you're 6 months or a year away from buying, just getting that clarity now can really help you feel prepared and more confident because it is a big decision.
I want to piggyback on what Shannon just mentioned. There are a lot of folks who reach out to me every week that are asking questions, especially if it's a first-time home purchase or maybe they've had a bit of a rocky credit situation take place and they have a goal of getting into a home. However, they know that it may not be tomorrow that they're going to qualify with variables that are in their favor. So oftentimes people will naturally just put the brakes on and then they're like, well, I can't qualify right now, so I'm not worried about it. I'll figure it out next year or whatever. What I do is I encourage these people who have that goal, I encourage them to talk with a mortgage professional because that mortgage professional can help them understand, okay, let's take a look at maybe your credit currently, or let's talk through some things that you can do to prepare to accomplish that goal. And so when she says that 6 to 12 month game plan, that is really important because that's going to set you up for success as you're making your regular purchases. And my last little golden nugget on this is I had a client who came to me, makes really good money, but they just made a large purchase of a very expensive vehicle. And so they were looking to make their first home purchase, and rightfully so. They have a really good paying job, they've got benefits, they're adulting like times 10, they got a really nice car, they're really excited. Well, the hard part is they just bought that car a month ago. So when we go to look at what they qualify for, their debt to income ratio showed that it was going to be rocky with that car payment. So this personalized game plan can help you make decisions in terms of, okay, do I have room to have a nice car and purchase a house in the next 12 months? You can prioritize that. Do you want to live in a house in 12 months, or do you want to have that nice car and then wait maybe 18 to 24 months to be able to make that home purchase? Those are some things to think about. So this helps people get a game plan so that it makes their goals attainable and it's not something that's just, oh, I can't qualify right now. So then it becomes discouraging. So I encourage you to reach out and ask some of those questions because that really helps you prepare and set yourself up for success with your decisions you're making today. And you're not just kind of, blowing smoke in the wind and seeing what happens. So that's important. The strategic part really plays an active part in this.
Yes, 1,000%. And it could be true that you don't qualify today, but there's a lot of things that can be true today that doesn't make them true a year from now, right? We all can change and, evolve in our lives from day to day or year to year. And so, as a lender, my job is to help you see, okay, this is where we can make some little tweaks in your credit. You can pay this card down a bit. Oh, you need to do this. I can give you a clear plan for how to, maybe you're not ready today, but how are you going to be ready in 6 months? And as long as I can't follow that plan for you, but I can help guide you. And I am more than happy to do that for anyone who wants to become a homeowner. Because at the end of the day, folks, the interest rate on rent is still 100%, and that's not going to be changing anytime soon. So if
Absolutely.
home ownership
Absolutely.
is your goal, let us help you and get you there. Set that goal for yourself and you can get it done. It might take 6 months, 12 months. I just had a buyer that, we had to put it off a bit, but they know exactly what they need to do to get there. So with that, your journey starts now with all this great information we've shared with you. The biggest thing we want you to take away today is that buying a home is possible. Don't let the headlines scare you. The buyers who are succeeding are just the ones who are informed, prepared, and working with the right team. So be sure to give Paige and I a call. Reach out to us. We're both located here in the Taylor, Thrall, Thorndale area. But we serve the greater Austin area and beyond. I can do loans anywhere in the state of Texas. So if you have questions, you want to run numbers, or just understand what buying could look like for you, we would love to help you. Do you have anything to add,
Absolutely.
Paige?
Nope, that's it for me, Shannon. You covered all the bases. We look forward to being able to serve you and support you in accomplishing your goals.
Yeah, absolutely.